So you've seen the Doherty Institute last night attempting to reassure the public that once we get to 70% vaccination targets, then we can open up, even if there are hundreds of cases out there. Is that justification enough for opening up in your view?
Well, it's one of the reasons we should do that, Peter. I mean, I'm never a slave to this type of modelling. It can't precisely tell you how many cases there'll be or how many unfortunate fatalities there will be. It doesn't work like that. But they've explained it very well. It's a model. So what happens is they seed their model with 30 cases, some kind of outbreak, and it actually doesn't matter too much what that initial number is, because the transmissibility of the virus, the infection rate of the virus is what drives to a certain peak. If you start with a high number of cases, of course, you'll get to that peak earlier. Yeah. But over time, it doesn't make all that much difference. So that is, I think, a fair enough explanation of their modelling. But the main reason we should open up too is we just cannot continue to do this. These lockdowns can't last forever. We've got to find a way to live with this properly. We'll just bankrupt the whole country if we go on with like this.
Yeah. And the Prime Minister, as we know, he's powerless when it comes to the states at the moment because the premiers are calling the shots. But there seems to be a unity ticket, if you like, that's formed between Gladys Berejiklian and Dan Andrews. Once we get to 70-80%, things have got to open up again. Some of the other premiers are reluctant. Now, can Gladys and Dan Andrews drag the others along, in your view?
Well, I suppose it's up to all of us. I've been out there pushing for this, highlighting the costs that these lockdowns are imposing on small businesses, destroying the livelihoods of children, not being able to go to school, isolating our own states. I mean, it seems like Premier Palaszczuk wants to make Queensland as isolated as some cave in Afghanistan. We cannot continue to go on like this. I see today's paper, there are more tourism businesses going under in Cairns. Now, some of this has been unavoidable. I don't blame the premiers for all of that. We've been living through a global pandemic, but there is about to be a time where they should be blamed for the further insensitive pain they are inflicting on many small businesses, on many poor people who don't have any other alternative for work. They have to start to factor in these other issues. We cannot remain obsessed with the number of coronavirus cases.
Yeah, I am about to speak to a tourist operator up in Cairns. Now, he's told me last night that business has dropped to about 10% of what it was, basically on his last legs. And he says that there is a huge disconnect between Annastacia Palaszczuk in the city and what's going on in regional areas. What can you say about that? What's your experience?
Well, look, Peter, I absolutely support and echo those statements. That's why I've been out there pushing these issues the last few weeks. Some regional areas are impacted much worse than others, and Cairns has been at the epicentre of it. But it seems to me the Queensland government just hasn't been listening to the people of Queensland. They've been blinded by the spotlights of their daily press conferences, and they've become distracted by that. They view themselves as some kind of celebrity today. There's a reality TV show at 11 o'clock every morning. I don't watch reality TV, and so I'm not watching those press conferences either. When really what we need to hear from is not the premiers, but we need to hear from those small business owners that are feeling this pain. Yeah. And they're the ones that the premiers need to spend more time listening to and less time flaunting themselves in front of press conferences.
Yeah, the Premier was voted in with an overwhelming majority, though. Do you believe that anything's changed on that front?
Yes, I do. I think sentiment has changed. And I supported the restrictions last year. Things were very uncertain. We didn't have a vaccine. Our vulnerable people, our older Australians, were particularly at risk. And so, yes, it was needed to do what we could, even at high cost, to protect vulnerable Australians. But things are very different a year on, and that mood is shifting within the public. And I think the premiers are showing a certain lead-footedness about not being agile enough to shift with that changed dynamic. We have the vaccine now, but premiers should be doing more to encourage people to get vaccinated. That is the way out of this. Whereas the Queensland government, in particular, has been almost in bed with the most virulent anti-vaxxers rather than being out there showing how there's a clear path out of what we've got at the moment.
The Premier Palaszczuk made the point yesterday that when they signed up to the National Cabinet model, the Doherty Institute model, it was around 30 cases a day. That was the modelling. And now that New South Wales is in excess of 800 a day, Queensland believes, well, that's not what we signed up for, and is threatening to keep the border closed beyond 80% vaccination rate. So does that wash with you? What does that say to you?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't for the reasons we outlined earlier. But the key point to make here is the initial starting point is not what determines where the peak gets to. It doesn't matter how many cases you start with, because once you've opened up or eased restrictions, it will spread. We know it will spread. We see that all around the world, in Israel, in the UK, in the US. That will happen. So saying that you will not open up because there are too many cases in New South Wales is effectively saying you will never open up, because there will never be a period where you will not risk an outbreak of some kind, regardless of your vaccination rates. And we can see that from the most vaccinated countries around the world.
Queensland also has the lowest uptake.
That's what the premiers have to explain. The Queensland government has to explain. Are they consigning the people of Queensland to permanent lockdowns? Is that their policy? Because that was never what we were promised. That's not the platform that Annastacia Palaszczuk was elected on. But if that is their policy, they best come clean with the people as soon as they can.
Well, looking at the vaccination rates as well, Queensland is coming last. Is that?
Yeah, and look,
a lot of that. I mean, I think we can.
As I said, I think the Queensland government have some culpability there, especially the Chief Medical Officer, Jeanette Young, who has been extremely inconsistent with her messaging around the vaccines. In saying that, Queensland is a very decentralised state. So initially, at least, a Pfizer vaccine could not be distributed in many areas because of its cold temperatures it had to be kept at. That's changed since, but only in the last few months. So that has kept us behind a little bit. But that's my point here, is that the Queensland government needs to shift tack. Stop focusing on the lockdowns and start focusing on getting vaccine rates up so that we can get all out of this mess, this hell that we're all living through.
Matt Canavan, we'll have to leave it there. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Peter. Cheers, mate.